Okay, so good afternoon from the UK. It's what? It's 20 minutes to 4 p.m. Obviously, this week, sporting wise, has been heavily disrupted with the preparations for the Queen's funeral here in the UK. So, Monday, everything's shut. I've still got to go to work, which is really annoying. But I get to start earlier and I get to finish earlier, and I should be back in home in time for the funeral. But obviously, a lot of rearranging of sporting fixtures has got to take place. I think it's is it. I think it's Frankfurt, Eintracht Frankfurt, or PSV versus Arsenal has been rearranged to October. There's a couple of games this weekend that are off. I think 3 out of the 10 Premier League games have been are having to be rearranged, and obviously, no sport, nothing will be happening Monday of a sporting nature in any sport. Um, yeah, it's Arsenal. I knew it was the Arsenal game that had basically was being rearranged until mid October, so a month's time. And this is a problem that the football authorities are going to have. So we have this unexpected situation here in the UK where the head of state has passed away, right? And then obviously there's the lying in state and the national mourning of 10 days. What happens if there's a weather delay in winter? Let's say we have some really bad weather at the end of October, beginning of November, autumnal kind of tail ends of hurricanes, those kind of storms that we get in northwest Europe coming off the North Atlantic. And it's not just here; it's also in mainland Europe as well. Let's say we get a batch of really heavy rain. We've had it in the past where October, November, it's where the weather can be very changeable, and that causes weather problems. And so sporting events have to be rearranged, especially football. This is where having the World Cup when they were having it is already causing logistical problems when these unexpected suspensions of play, such as here in the UK, occur. And fixtures have to be rearranged, like the Arsenal PSV, because there's not enough police officers available in Greater London to police the match. Um, Again, it would have made more sense to play the game in Holland, in Eindhoven, and have PSV and flip the home and away. But no, it's already penciled in as this is an Arsenal home game. They could have played it at a neutral venue. They could have played it behind closed doors. If there was security concern, they could have played it. And they've proven before they can be flexible. Um, but I did find it very interesting that football can. I found it very interesting that football was the only sport here in the UK to go, we're not playing last weekend, and it's still being impacted now. Every other sport, it was up to the teams playing, it was up to the discretion of the home and away team whether they were agreed to play or, you know, they were feeling it by how, things were playing out. They were playing it out and see how the response was. And to be brutally honest, the last time the monarch died, which was back in 1952, play was suspended for 3 days and then they just got on with it, which is pretty much what they've done here. When King George died, they suspended play for 3 days. All sporting events were stopped. Um, there is a lot of pressure to get games rearranged because the TV money, the media partners. There is a lot of pressure to get things done. I do think what has since sort of been leaked is that but they couldn't trust the fans to behave. There was a big concern within the Football Association, within the Premier League, within the Football League that certain clubs or clubs in general, but predominantly certain fan bases that have a bad reputation, both domestically and abroad, would not observe a minute's silence or 2 minutes silence, and there would be disorder. And we have seen a few incidents with a very small minority where that has unfortunately been the case, but the majority have been very well behaved. But there was a massive concern within the higher levels of the administration of the game in the UK that there would be issues with fan misbehaviour. Now, yes, Side point: World Cup, November, December, logistical nightmare. And yes, uh, there is going to be. We're more likely to have bad weather in January and February than in October and November and December. Absolutely. Um, if you follow my channel long enough, you will see I've posted some weather videos. Most of the bad weather that has occurred has, especially with snow, ice, very wintry conditions, has happened in January, February, March, and even April. We have had snow on April Fool's Day and St Patrick's Day in this country since the channel has started. And so there is a bigger likelihood of disruption actually later in the season than earlier in the season. I agree with that. But I do fear we are going to see other stoppages this season for a variety of issues. There's also some clubs are calling for earlier kickoff times to avoid running the floodlights to save on energy costs, and the debate about the 3 p.m. blackout is still continuing as well on the media side of things. Now, football in general, I think we are going to see issues with which impact all the leagues in I think in Europe this winter, both before and after the World Cup. And yes, if a club is on a cup run, for example, then the fixture congestion, we've seen that before as well, has impacted a club's season or ability to be as competitive as possible. We have seen it before, and it has undone teams. Um, and then you get the critics going, well, they got, they should have invested in their squad depth. That's irrelevant. If a team is competing, let's say Man City, for example, they go on, they've got a great record. We've done their history, got a great record in the league and the League Cup. They've got a fair record in the FA Cup. If you look at the stages they get knocked out, they've only won it twice under the current ownership. And of course, Champions League. If they're trying to compete on four fronts, and then there's disruption to a domestic or even the European games because of the weather, because of events like the Queen's passing and the situation the UK finds itself in right now until the funeral on Monday. Um, it it does create logistical headaches that I think FIFA, and this is where the blame lies at FIFA's feet, in my opinion. Um, And you could also argue, yes, COVID's had an impact over the last couple of years, where they've had to congest things and condense things, and there's been, restart of play in 2020, that the shortened off season we've had, and the shortened transfer window we've had this summer, for example, rearranging the Euros. There has been things that have happened, which is outside of football's control completely. But I think FIFA, when they awarded that World Cup to Qatar, opened Pandora's box completely. Um, but then the trust between the fans, the clubs, the play, all the stakeholders within the game is broken with the administration, completely broken within the administration. Um, so that's interesting. Yes, I have heard that on a non-sport topic. Yes, at last count, it was 4 miles. They have capacity to go up to 10. It may take 24 hours from joining the queue to actually get into see walk past in Westminster Hall. I have heard that. That is insane. Now, I remember the Princess Margaret and the Queen Mother, slightly less important rules in a sense in comparison in the modern age, and Princess Diana as well was another one. That was in the age before social media was really a thing. All of them went in a 5-year spell between 97 and 2002. Prince Philip, obviously, COVID was still a massive issue. There were still restrictions in place. So there is things like that. The reason why a league like the Isthmian League can do early kickoffs is they don't have TV rights that are massive. They might have a few games streamed on YouTube or other streaming sites, video sharing sites where they upload their content, but they don't have a TV deal, and they are a non-league organisation. Is the Isthmian League so? Um, um, and the fact that a organised league and the clubs within it have all agreed to bring matches forward to earlier kick-off times. Whether I think fans will agree that might be a better idea as well, because of the ongoing, you know, crisis in the economy, including the bloody hair. My hair's getting really long. The ongoing energy crisis and the costs a costing crisis, and that is showing that the impact that the economic situation is currently having. There is no doubt on that. It will come to a point where, especially clubs in the National League, League Two, and League One, will probably be agitating for a similar move. They do have much fewer games on TV. They will start agitating for similar moves as well. And then that raises the question of the 3 p.m. blackout, and would that then become like a 1 p.m. blackout? Let's say if games was kick off at 1 o'clock or midday. Um, and 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 then you've got to think about the security arrangements with police and private security, and there's going to become growing pressure on the Football League and the Premier League eventually. I have no doubt, because it's if that is going, back to July. I mean, that's a couple of months ago. We will see what happens. We will see what happens, and we'll have to see how attendances hold up as well in things like the FA Cup and in league games and League Cup. And if the attendances really are scraping the barrel at some games and a lot of empty seats, then the 3 p.m. blackout rule is pointless. Oh yeah, it's got to have a Coke Zero Vanilla, best flavour out there. Personal opinion. Yes. Um. Yeah, the impact that Queen Elizabeth had. Well, look, her time in charge. She's never missed. Not a single World Cup has been played where she's not been on the throne or alive. So every World Cup, in the Football World Cup, Rugby Union World Cup, Rugby League World Cup, Cricket World Cup, every World Cup that has been hosted in all sports, she's been alive for. So this Rugby League World Cup and this upcoming Football World Cup will be the first two World Cups, and the T20 Cricket World Cup will be the first three World Cups actually where she's not been alive. UEFA, it's a political thing because it's a club game, not an international. That's technically, but the reason behind it's a club fixture, not an international fixture, and it's UEFA being really not reading the room, and it's just it's people who administer the game not knowing the cultural significance of certain things that happen within certain countries. It's the administrators at an international level. So UEFA is an international organisation because it covers multiple. It's a pan-national organisation. They get better pan-European organisation. Um, they haven't read the room. Cultural sensitivities. It's like going to the former Yugoslavia and playing the Yugoslav national anthem between um, a European game, for example, or a club game between Red Star Belgrade and Dinamo Zagreb. You're gonna have a riot, basically. Well, it's not the same as that, but that's the lack of local knowledge when it comes to um, governing with common sense. There's a lack of common sense, especially in sports administration. And apparently, the wealthier and bigger the sport, the less common sense is applied. I've noticed this a lot with sporting governing bodies that they really are out of touch a lot of the time, and make really poor administrative decisions and rulings. Um, that's pretty much it. It's a UEFA rule. It's a club game. They've got the UEFA anthem, which the Champions League and Europa League anthems, and it's in their UEFA constitution that that they are politically neutral and all this kind of stuff. Um, Political statements should be. It's all drivel, basically. In my opinion, it doesn't bother me either way. That the fact that Rangers did or didn't play the national anthem doesn't really overly bother me. But they applied for special dispensation to do so. They did it through the legitimate channels, and they appealed the decision again through the legitimate channels, and they were rejected. They did it anyway. Rangers are going to cop a fine for that. They are going to cop a heavy fine for going against the UEFA ruling. They may have the next European game they're going to play in the Champions League group stage, they're probably going to have to play with a section of Ibrox empty. Which again, if this is what I find hilarious. So when Nicholas Bentner had his paddy power, and I can use this as the example, boxer shorts on when he celebrated in Euro 2012, he got a bigger fine. I think it was like a 200,000 or 100,000 euro fine he got for that, which was more than what the is it the Montenegrin FA or the Macedonian FA got for the racist chanting aimed at England players? In I think it was in the Euros qualifier or World Cup qualifier a few years ago. That's how out of touch UEFA are. So Rangers are probably going to get a bigger fine for that than sectarian chanting that both Celtic and Rangers have both been found guilty of in the past in Europe. Than the sectarian chanting that Rangers and Celtic they're going to get a whacking fine, and they're going to get part of their stadium closed as punishment for basically telling UEFA, no, we're going to do it anyway. And this is where you see across Europe a lot of fan bases put up signs, anti-UEFA signs, be it domestic or European games that they're playing in. You can see that it's all about it's the PR side of things, and I think UEFA have got this one wrong. They could have given special dispensation. It's like, for example, on the 20th anniversary of 9/11. So last year, it was 20 years since what happened on the 9th of September in 2001, Twin Towers and the Pentagon, and what happened on that day. The Americans would go completely apeshit if they were told they couldn't have their national anthem played or anything like that. We've seen the debate over poppies on home nations shirts when England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland are playing games in regards to Remembrance Sunday. UEFA doesn't get the cultural aspect of the various nations that encompass what is UEFA, the various gets it horribly wrong. Oh yeah, it was Bulgaria. It was with them, and then Hungary as well. And what happened at Euro 2020 final. Rangers will get fined more for that than all those other incidents that involved hooligan or racist elements or crowd disorder. And then we can bring up the Champions League final switch from St. Petersburg to Paris and what happened outside the Stade de France. And Thierry Henry summed it up. The Stade de France is not the Parc des Princes. It's not in a nice bit of Paris. It's in a very rough, deprived area called Saint Denis, which is one of the poorest, most dangerous areas in the city, if not the whole of France, for deprivation, high crime rates, gang-related incidents. And when questioned on it, he went, "This is not Paris; it's Saint Denis." And again, UEFA not realising a lot of the problems. And it's not the first time that the Stade de France has been criticised at major sporting events. It will not be the last. And again, UEFA went for the big shiny stadium, not knowing that there's actually a lot of issues surrounding the stadium on a social economic level. UEFA don't do common sense. But then again, looking at other sporting governing bodies, they don't do governings by common sense either. 66 was a mixed year for a lot of reasons. The Aberfan disaster is one of them. England winning the World Cup is another. And I can't believe it was 68 that the Troubles officially started in Northern Ireland and the Republic, but there was underlying simmering tensions across the Irish Sea for quite some time. Yeah, the mid-60s was a very interesting period. And then, yes, you can now say the World Cup win is a positive, and the Aberfan disaster is obviously one of the biggest. There was a lot of changes that came out of the Aberfan disaster, but that is actually a topic for the other channel. Like, I can look at what changed following that when it came to industrial waste disposal and environmental law that came out of it, health and safety law that came out of it. working practices that came out of it, and a whole raft of things. The BLM and the Rainbow Laces and the Kick It Out campaign and other bits and pieces we can argue to death, and that's they and the polarizing effect of over politicizing charitable organisations or social justice causes that you want to be apolitical. The civil rights movement is obviously has been going on since the 50s, post World War II. The civil rights movement, both in Europe, North America, the anti-apartheid movement throughout the 60s, 70s, and 80s into the 90s. Sport and politics has unfortunately been intertwined since the 30s with the Berlin Olympics in 36. Both the Summer Winter Games in 1936. Sport has been politicised for the best part of 90 years. People don't realise this. They say, "Oh, we love our professional sport being neutral and all that, and free of political interference." But that isn't actually as true as people believe. Um, did Aberfan make a difference to health and safety? Yeah, because it's industrial law. Where you dispose of your industrial waste cannot be literally right on top of residential and commercial areas. I mean, the scary thing is the school got destroyed. It did change the way that mining communities, steelworks, heavy industry, basically. It ushered in a change in the mining industries, the steel making industry as well, because that coal would have gone to make steel. Um, you know, disposal of industrial waste. Yeah, health and safety law. Yeah. Um, have I seen England's new squad? Oh, look, how Harry Maguire, for example, again has been named in that squad is beyond me. Absolutely beyond me. Um, I briefly had a little glaze over it. Um, Again, how a player like Harry Maguire can be named in that squad, considering the 18 months he has had, is just baffling. Baffling to me. And when people were saying we want Graham Potter for England, that's not going to happen now. I, I regularly, yeah. Look, it's Southgate. How many right backs do you need? That was the joke last year. Yes, we got to a final. I will admit that. The balance of the squad is completely wrong. It was wrong last year. I was thankfully proven wrong. I thought we would struggle to get past the first knockout game. Um, we got to the final, so I was happy to be proved wrong last year. I had concerns about England's progression through the tournament. I thought the England Scotland game would be a far better affair. I was really disappointed with both sides in that 0-0, but really disappointed. That was a shocking game. But he's got the balance of the squad wrong, and I think at this point there's going to be a lot of questions about squad selection yet again. Now, again, England could have a fantastic tournament on results wise, maybe not style of play, but the results. Get to a final again, maybe even win a final, and prove us all wrong again. I'm less confident now than what I was a year and a half ago with the Euros, and I wasn't overly confident with the Euros last year. And I'm less confident now than what I was then. And what, regardless of what you think of Gareth Southgate, he has got us to a semi-final and a final. Now, we haven't won the big game yet, but I would say he always. It's either an indictment of we don't have enough midfielders of a decent enough level at international level to compete, or the start, or he's more concerned about the defensive quality we have, which is why I wouldn't take Harry Maguire. Wouldn't have anywhere near the squad. If we're going by proper form, Maguire's done at international level. My favourite West Midlands club. I have a soft spot for West Brom. I like their stadium. I actually want to see Wolves do well. Um, but I've got family ties to Wolverhampton and Walsall and Dudley. So I want to see Walsall climb their way up the Football League pyramid. I don't really have a particular favourite West Midlands club. I think I've done a history on all the West Midland clubs now as well. Yeah, I have done a history on all the West Midlands clubs that are based in Birmingham and the Black Country now. So I don't really have an outstanding favourite, but I do have a little. I like to see West Brom do quite well. I've always had a little soft spot for West Brom, Baggies. I think the club in the West Midlands that frustrates me the most is Birmingham City. You know, there's a lot of Birmingham City fans that are subscribers to the channel. They're a club that frustrate me the most. And then looking at the club histories, they, apart from Walsall, obviously, former Football Alliance club, remember that, they've got a shockingly low amount of silverware for Birmingham City, which I find stunning, considering that all the clubs in the West Midlands are all formed in the 1870s, 1880s, and 1890s. They all are historical clubs that go way back to the foundation of the FA and the foundation of the Football League or Football Alliance. You know, and then they've all been around a very long time. Birmingham City frustrate me the most. I've got a soft spot for West Brom, Wolves, and Walsall. Aston Villa are just historically a machine. And if you don't have Aston Villa, you don't have the Football League. Because it was at Aston Villa's chairman's insistence that the Football League, basically, the meetings that took place to form it took place. They were the driving force behind the foundation. So without Aston Villa's chairman being the real driving force behind the meetings, we don't have the Football League. The Football Alliance may have won out, and the rules of the game may have changed or been different, and the structure that we see today may have been completely different. So without Aston Villa, you don't have the Football League, basically, because I don't think there was enough of the other clubs that ended up forming the Football League who were really sold on the plan until the plan was laid out by the Aston Villa chairman in those two meetings that really got them on board. Well, my thoughts about Rangers and UEFA. UEFA misreading the room. UEFA governing, dotting every T, crossing every T, dotting every I, by the book, rigid, lack of flexibility. Rangers requested through the official channels for a dispensation. Basically, as soon as the Queen had passed, and they were like, "Our next game that we are allowed to play, we wish to have the national anthem. If it's a European game, we wish to do that." Um, um, and it was rejected out of hand. So it's just UEFA base. If, let's say, something happens in another country in Europe, similar head of state, maybe the Dutch, royal family, or Belgian, or Danish, or Swedish, or Norwegian, because there's other royal families in Europe like Luxembourg, or a president like Emmanuel Macron. Something similar happens in one of the other European countries with a head of state, be it a hereditary monarchy, of which there are quite a few still left, or a president, and they give that dispensation to that club that applies. Think of the meltdown on social media. Think of the meltdown and the protests, because other clubs have also put in for this sort of dispensation before and have also been rejected. So the litmus test will be is when the King of Holland, for example. Now he's going to have a very long time as King of Holland, William. I think it's William the Fourth, King of Holland. I think I have met him. He's a very nice chap. Let's say the King of Holland, the King of the Netherlands, actually, William. Let's say something similar happens to him, where obviously dies while still the reigning monarch, because the last couple of Dutch monarchs have abdicated in favour of or the King of Spain, Felipe, for example. Juan Carlos, his father, is still alive, but he abdicated again for age reasons. One of those heads of state, because they're also, especially Spain, very influential country when it comes to UEFA. As are the Dutch, ironically, very influential country in regards to UEFA. What happens if there's something similar happens in Spain or Holland, for example, one of the Scandinavian countries, absolutely, and that dispensation is given to a Real Madrid or an Ajax, which Rangers applied for but was refused. You are going to see protests from the four home nations, because they also make up UEFA, going, well, we were not given this privilege, right? That will be the litmus test. And they've set a precedent where other nations have also put in for these requests before to UEFA and have been turned down by UEFA. Now, it's an individual club. It's not, let's say, the Scottish FA as a whole, or all four nations FAs going, can we do this at European games? So that is interesting. So it's an individual club. So it would have been a different story if it was the English, Scottish, Welsh, and Northern Irish FAs putting in a petition to do so. That isn't the case. Could you, I think, one of the West Midlands club become a Big Six? Look, the Big Six is a inflated, artificial club. Spurs in there, really? I haven't won the league since '61. Let that sink in. Spurs, great history, haven't won silverware for 14 years, and that was the last time they won was a League Cup. Yes, they got to a European final and lost the worst ever Champions League final in history. I fell asleep watching the game. I should do a history video on Charles I and II. Yes, Charles II is more interesting than Charles I. Quite frankly, I like the Black Boy Prince, as he was known because of his dark hair. Charles II, Bonnie Charlie, not Bonnie Prince Charlie, he's a Jacobite who comes later, but Charles II. Charles III, I do need to do some more videos on there. I was actually thinking at one point of getting rid of that channel completely, just doing everything on this channel, but there's enough content up there to keep people entertained. I was doing all the kings and queens in chronological order, so I'm well short of even the Tudor period at this point. The Black Prince was Edward III's son, whose offspring became, oh my god, now you make whose son was Richard II. So he died the year before Edward III. Black Prince was the first ever Prince of Wales. Second ever Prince, third Prince of Wales. Sorry, Edward II, Edward III. He was Edward III's oldest son. Died of dysentery the year before Edward III passes, and his son became Richard II, who himself was deposed and murdered by John of Gaunt, who became not John of Gaunt, Henry Bolingbroke, father of Henry V, so Henry IV, and then Henry V, and then Henry VI, and then you get the Wars of the Roses. So there's all that dynastic stuff, which is why when you see clubs like Blackburn, they have the Lancashire Rose, and Leeds United have the Yorkshire Rose, and then you see some clubs with the Tudor Rose. It's to do with various bits and pieces, and that's why England have the red rose for some reason. I don't understand why England Rugby Union have that, but yes, it's interesting how I got onto European royalty. But yes, Charles II is a very interesting character. But was the Merry Monarch? That's his nickname. The Merry Monarch. Very, very interesting character. The Restoration period. If you read about Samuel Pepys, the diarist, who was also a secretary at the Admiralty, the early years of Charles II's reign is very, very interesting. Which clubs have the Tudor Rose? Blackburn obviously won. Obviously, Leeds have the Yorkshire Rose. There's a few other. I think that's it. Although if you look very closely on the Manchester City and Man United logos, they do actually have hints of the Tudor, of the Lancashire Red Rose. The Tudor Rose. I'm trying to think. There is one. I think I've done a video on it. It's going to annoy me intensely. I'm going to have a little look, but I know there are sports teams that do have the Tudor Rose of Lancastrian red and Yorkshire stripe, and are Republicans allowed on this channel? I try and keep politics off the channel. I'm a pragmatic kind of guy. I love the way the Republicans came up as do I want to allow this in the chat? Apparently, the word Republican is a naughty word that triggers people because YouTube thinks it's going to be a Donald Trump fest. I try and keep politics off as much as possible. That's for the other channel in regards to discussing should we have a constitutional hereditary monarchy, which I think is actually the most stable form of government. If you look at all the Scandinavian nations, us, the Dutch, the Belgians, Luxembourg, Spain not so much, but the other monarchies in Europe, very stable government, very stable economies. You look at countries like France, they like rioting a lot. Italy, they go through governments every few months. It seems they have elections. Um, Germany, it's all by coalition, and the chancellor, as Merkel found out, if a party in your coalition doesn't like you anymore, you're stuffed. I I have studied politics, and the scary thing is, constitutional monarchies are generally the best run countries. Spain has had a love hate relationship with their royal family for a long time, before the Franco era and since the Franco era. Juan Carlos was quite beloved by the Spanish people. Felipe, not so much. It's more his sister that's called the problem. Felipe, not so much. Um, the Spanish monarchy is a. I've got to do a history of the Spanish monarchy because that's hilariously mental. The Spaniards are a bit mental when it comes to their monarchy. Um, Quite frankly, I've got viewers from all over the world, so there are people who live in republics or presidential democracies, which are different to republics, by the way. Even though they are no queen or king as head of state or emperor, they are different. Um, I've got viewers globally. Some are Commonwealth realms that Charles is still head of state for. Others are Commonwealth realms which are now republics, although still part of the Commonwealth. I've got viewers in the US. I've got viewers in South America. I've got viewers um, on mainland Europe. I've got viewers all over the place. Um, and their backgrounds are all very, very interesting. I've never once asked a viewer to view um, reveal their political dispensation ever. What I can tell you, and what I find very, very interesting for the most part, especially with the Scottish football fans, is their anti-sectarianism is well and truly. They don't agree with the sectarianism that is portrayed in the media. I've had fans from both Celtic and Rangers, Hibs and Hearts, so the real sectarian clubs where there is a massive issue, basically calling it out and saying enough's enough. So I think the media always seems to ramp up the rivalries between these clubs and really play on the hate, historical hate that isn't there as much of a problem as it has been, which is uh, is what it is. Salary cap. Oh, this is a good question. Right, now we can get off politics and political views and personal views on should we have monarchies still. I kind of like monarchies. They're kind of more fun to look at than dodgy presidents who bought their elections by corruption. Trump. Salary cap. Has there ever been a successful salary cap in sport? Has it ever worked anywhere? Um, that's a very good one. I think to look at salary caps in general, no system is perfect. It's the best answer I can give to that. Some are more effective than others. I think the NHL is as a salary cap right now under a lot of spotlight because it's staying flat for a couple of seasons, and then you throw in the escrow where the players have to give up some of their salary and may not get all that money they've paid in back. Um, that's a very interesting one. There is at least a third of the league currently over the salary cap. Um, Now, that's where long-term injured reserve and other loopholes, which are there, which can be used within the rules, get used. I'm not saying it's right. And in the postseason, so the playoffs, the salary cap doesn't apply, so you can be as over as you want. It's postseason, so it's irrelevant, and that's angered a lot of fans, especially in relation to teams like Tampa Bay and Vegas when they make the playoffs. They're ridiculously over the cap. They recall all those players have long-term injured reserve. They're nice and fresh. They're not banged up. They've been in full training, whatever. Um, when you say has it worked, in what sense has it worked? because obviously the rules are in place, and if you break them, you get punished. Now, I think the AFL and NRL in Australia, their salary caps are flawed, and that has been discussed to death. The NHL, there are, I think, in my opinion, too many loopholes where you can get cap relief or work your way around the salary cap, and a lot of teams are over. But you've got to have a cap floor as well, which, you know, at the moment, Arizona have just managed to hit the Arizona Coyotes have just hit the cap floor. Otherwise, they'll just put all their prospects in the lineup to deliberately tank. Tanking is another issue in a cap system because of draft picks. Now, I would argue that no salary cap is working effectively, no, and not as intended. Now, the NBA, I think, has had less, question marks over its salary cap because signing bonuses. That's another way around a salary cap. The NFL, I mean, you look at some of the salaries. The players are getting paid more now than pre-cap in real terms. So when it have any, I don't know what the punishments would be because they probably haven't been caught. I have not heard of an NHL team being caught. That doesn't mean they're not breaking the salary cap by going, we can't put all these players on long-term injured reserve. But I think the NHL salary cap system, I think, is a little bit more transparent than others and a bit more, it's not. If teams are breaking the salary cap deliberately, either by not hitting the cap floor or by not being under, there are ways around it. I don't think a team's been. It's like non-disclosed third-party payments is, I think, the only way an NHL team could circumvent the cap. But you have limited roster sizes, and players' contracts are public knowledge. What are players getting? So what it averages out to, average annual value, is what it is. AAV. I hate that term. Average annual value, or annual average value. Because some caps are weighted towards the early years of, so some contracts are weighted to the early years of that contract, and some weighted to the end where the extension kick in, the booster kicks in, where the take home doubles, but they count. The salary, I think, it's a difficult one because I'm not a financial expert and I find salary caps actually quite confusing. Which is one of my weaknesses as a sports fan. Is I know a lot of other sports fans who follow, the Cap Friendly is a website that tries to approximate what team salary caps are worth and what their contracts are worth with average annual value. And yes, you could argue. I think what is interesting is the NHL, I think, has a very efficient salary cap with a lot of loopholes, but very efficient because no team has actually ever been caught deliberately breaching the cap. Now, I'm not saying teams aren't doing it because they probably are. I think there's a lot of loopholes to circumvent the cap within the rules, like long-term injured reserve, which is like a team like Montreal, Carey Price, with that ridiculously big contract that he signed in the lifetime of this channel. He's not even the whole. I think he's about halfway through it. Mega long contract extension. He doesn't look likely to play for a second straight season. He may retire, but he's still under contract, long-term injured reserve. What then will happen is a team like Montreal will trade that salary to a team like Arizona, who's got 20, 30 million in cap space per season, and just do a cap dump, which is a way of, we've got that contract off our books. All they have to pay him out, which then lowers their salary cap. In regards to the NRL salary cap was originally designed to have a draft system, but with the way rugby league is structured in Australia, it doesn't work. The AFL, their salary cap was also designed to work with the draft system. They have that, but then you get teams deliberately losing to get high draft picks, good up and coming prospect talent, which is where we've seen teams tank. I hate tanking. In a promotion relegation system that we have in European sport, for the most part, although certain sports and leagues don't, but for the most part, let's talk about football. If you were to tank in the MLS, yes, you can get away with the draft. You are to deliberately lose the Premier League, you're relegated. So, if we were to introduce a salary cap, for example, to the English Premier League, it would have to be something similar to what rugby union had before they ring fenced, which, as we know, is flawed because teams were breaking that cap at will. Only two have been caught, but allegations have been made against 5 or 6, maybe even as high as most of the league in breach of the salary cap rules. Um, and we know the rugby union salary cap system did not work. So then what do you bring in? Do you just cap upper wages for players, what they can earn up to per week, like they had in the 60s? The upper wage limit of what a player could earn per week, which in a sense is sort of a salary cap, but then you just you would pay all your players a flat X amount per week rate. Um, the players, if a salary cap is to be introduced into European football, it would have to be a UEFA-led negotiation, and or UEFA would have to be involved because it would obviously then impact the transfer market. The players would also have to take a salary cut or be willing to, on their next contract extension, take less money, or massive signing bonus, which is cap exempt, which then means their weekly wage drops. I think the TV broadcasters, I think the TV deal is now plateaued, and shrinking the league will do that. You have less games to broadcast. No, I wouldn't suggest 3 players over the cap and the marquee signing rule that the MLS has. Nah, then it's just a flaw. So the MLS is a very good league in the sense that it's developed a lot of good American talent and Canadian talent, done very, very well. And a lot of decent European and South American talent's gone there to play at various points throughout their careers. Sometimes even extending their careers by playing over there, and then coming back to Europe, like Ibrahimovic, Beckham, for example, didn't retire in the MLS. They came back to Europe to retire. I don't like the marquee player rule because that completely is like, well, you ridiculous. Like clubs like Barcelona aren't helping themselves, and they're not helping the game. They're damaging the game. And then you got owners like Todd Bowley saying we should have a Premier League All Stars North versus South, which won't. How do you fit that into the schedule? Do you get rid of the Charity Shield and turn that into the All Star game? The Americanization of sports doesn't sit well in Europe. It may sit well in Australia. They may go, yeah, we'll have the All Star format in the NRL or the AFL, and we may try and sell the game to North America and take games over there. It's fine. It doesn't sit well with fans here. And I think he wasn't paying attention with the European Super League debacle last year because he wasn't the owner. And Chelsea begrudgingly signed up to that, going, "We're not sure on this idea." That was under the previous administration at the club. Let me just let's get comfy because my back is killing me. That's a lot better. Is there a salary cap in the fan review? I haven't read sort of the fan-led review or the proposals. I do think League One and League Two 2 years ago. This time 2 years ago, I was preparing myself for. I was prepping up planning my Christmas. I was. We had no idea that the lockdown, the second lockdown we were going to have, was going to happen, and that the country would basically shut down a second time, and that had the impact that had on the game and the struggles that League One and League Two had, and the non-league had, in basically completing the 2020-2021 season. Clubs like Dover Athletic could not complete the season, and they were punished for that. Torquay United were running away with the National League on the verge of getting back to the Football League, and then the fixture congestion destroyed them. But it was at that point that League One and League Two clubs almost unanimously said, we need a salary cap. Now, they're small fry in comparison to the big clubs and the big leagues around Europe. But I think it's going to be interesting to see. I think it happens. I think a salary cap in European football does happen Europe-wide. I know there's certain leagues that have salary rules, but there's no rules against length of contract. There's no rules against the size of the signing bonus and third-party payments to players. So clubs like in Spain do have a salary limit. I think it's a percentage of income. Hence why Barcelona, Atletico Madrid, and Real Madrid have got the 10 highest paid players, apart from Mbappe in Europe, play in Spain, apart from Mbappe and Messi. Because signing bonuses don't count as salary, they count as bonus. No, I wouldn't. I wouldn't fiddle with the promotion relegation system apart from maybe the playoff structure. It should be top three up, bottom three down, or top four up, bottom four down, depending on. I would just say top three get promoted, get rid of the playoff. But the playoff games now are worth so much money. The winner of the championship playoff final is the wealthiest game in club football. It's worth more than the Champions League final for revenue, which is where the distortion comes. Which is why clubs like Norwich, for example, become yo-yo clubs. Why Nottingham Forest have been able to sign so many players is the money they've made from the playoff final. If you have a salary cap and get rid of the directors' test you have in England clubs, look, the fit and proper persons test is not fit and proper for purpose. That's the joke I have. But you can still have a director's test where they meet criteria of source of funds, proof of funds, for example, and the suitability. But unfortunately, too many bad apples have slipped through to then rot the whole game, rot the whole bunch. Too many rotten fruit have got through into the storage container. We'll call the larder that is English football or football in general across Europe that have been allowed to fester within the game. That has corrupted the game. And that's not just an English problem, that's a problem across European football. Too many bad players are allowed to be club owners. And the various FA's directors and ownership tests are clearly a joke. And too many dodgy club presidents at those clubs that elect a club president like Real Madrid and Barcelona. It's a sport that is built upon debt. Professional sport in general is a sport built upon debt in Europe. And that comes from very weak governance and very weak enforcement of the rules that already exist. And a refusal to, when a rule is not working, like financial fair play, come up with a solution or a fix quickly. So UEFA aren't planning to bring in their new spending rules for 2 more years, 2024, for the 2024-2025 season. So financial fair play is still going to be an issue for another 2 more seasons, this one and the next one. If you have a salary cap and get the salary cap or spending cap, that would include transfers, I would assume, is I think does happen in our lifetimes. I think it happens sooner rather than later because of the amount of North American owners and North American investment in the European game. I think that's very likely to happen um, because they're used to working in that kind of system. But as we have seen, the Premier League and the Football League and the FA have failed in their governance of the game, in their governance of enforcing the rules, and when the rules aren't working or are needing change, too slow to improve the framework in which the governance is meant to take place. And this is where fans are like, well, this weak governance is the best way I would describe it. I would say that weak governance at a national and pan-European level with UEFA and obviously with FIFA has allowed corruption to seep into those organisations and then into the domestic clubs and leagues around Europe. There has been corruption allegations labelled at every league across Europe at some point, be it be an individual actor at a club official making some dodgy payments to players, trying to fix matches, to corruption within the organising governing bodies where payments are withheld and dodgy dealings are done, to referee, the whole thing. The Steve Dale thing, well, I covered that to death. Um, the Bolton Wanderers situation that was running parallel at the same time was equally scandalous, but they started the season, so they were allowed to play games. This is why Derby County was not allowed to fail because they had played games that season. As I say, in my opinion, Bury should not have happened. The Football League and the FA, they need a complete clear out at board level, a complete clear out utterly. Unfortunately, it won't happen. We know it won't happen. It's a job for it's jobs for the boys. The old, the scratch my back, I scratch yours. When it comes to sport, because some of these people involved in the Football League and the FA and the Premier League will get jobs at the ECB, the RFU, the RFL, all the various sports governing bodies across the board. British Olympic Association, UK Athletic. On the boards, these people are getting paid decent money to do not a lot and do it very badly. Yes, the club has been reformed, much like AFC Wimbledon were, and much like FC United and Manchester in process at the Glazers, Chester, Hereford. But it sums up a situation that we shouldn't be discussing. It should never have got that far. There's a spider that's going to be sucked up my vacuum cleaner in a minute. Yep, there is. It's fucked off now. I've got this one. I cannot stand the arachnids in this flat. How they get in, I don't know. To be honest, it looks like some English clubs. Well, I would say football clubs in general. I wouldn't say English. I would say pan-European. But yes, are just laundering money. More interested in financial transactions than winning games. A lot of these clubs have also got overseas investors and owners. Yeah, that has been mentioned before, and it's not just a European problem or an English problem. I watched the Australian version of Panorama is called Four Corners, and I watched a special documentary they did on money laundering in professional sport, and they looked specifically at the A League, so the Australian top flight, but they also looked at their version of the director's test, and they also looked at other sports as well with overseas money from suspicious sources, and how sports governing bodies don't care where the money comes from as long as the money's coming. And Just let that sink in. Let that sink in. There is clear. It's called sports washing, it's called legit. It doesn't matter if if the money's come from a country that's got a human rights record like China or Russia or the Middle East, or if it's organised crime. It's sports washing. And it's one of the few times, and then Talksport with Simon Jordan basically summed it up quite perfectly as well. Well, he's part of the problem, not the solution. But it's one of the few times I actually agree with Simon Jordan, his comments in regards to the Chelsea situation and the Man Cities and the Newcastles and all that. Sports washing. Organised criminals have been involved in professional sport for years, in having shares in clubs, putting, and laundering their money through them to get a nice return, or making it their legitimate investment and making money. The same as boxing, is another sport, mixed martial art, MMA, and as I say, professional sport does not care where the money comes from as long as the money keeps coming. Now, and for a long time, a lot of fans didn't care either. That perception has changed. We're not as naive as what we once were many years ago. The access to the internet, the availability of information, it's far easier to get information now than what it was when the Premier League was set up in 1992. I think 95% of how, or was it, it's either 95 or 97% of households in the UK have access to the internet. Now, 30 years ago, you're talking about 20% maximum, maybe 10. So the ease of, I can now go on my phone, right, and I can get on the internet on my phone. 20 years ago, 30 years ago, no one in my family had a mobile phone 30 years ago. 20 years ago, yes, me, my mum, and my sister, we all had our phones. We finally all had handsets. None of them had the WAP, which was the internet adapter, wireless and something wireless. I can't remember what WAP stood for, but it was basically saying you've got internet. It was we had Bluetooth on our Nokias, but what I find interesting is so that ease of access to correct information and also false information, but also correct information. I think so. The access of information, the access to the internet, the World Wide Web. So we look at the Premier League, Champions League era, the last 30 years. The world is completely different now to what it was in 1992. Completely different. I mean, Windsor Castle caught fire in '92 as well. I seem to remember. Oh, my neighbours are being loud. Um, but no, it's the access to information. So fans are better educated now than what they were. Um, and therefore it's also easier to coordinate fan groups who want to protest. It's easier now than what it was 30 years ago. Um, you know, the the whole landscape has changed, and and that goes with the ticket price. That goes with the price of Sky Sports. BT Sport wasn't even a thing. Setanta wasn't a thing. Cable, the whole media landscape around sport, the whole demographic of sports fans has changed. The player-based demographic has changed. The demographic, actually, as I said, the demographic of where players are born, raised, has changed. Look at the squads, how international they are now. It's very unlikely you're going to find, it's not as unlikely, not very likely. It's less likely that the majority of the squad will be local lads who are born locally. Yes, you've got the youth systems, but in actual fact, the Lisbon Lions, for example, all the entire Celtic team were born within 20 miles of the stadium. That doesn't happen anymore. So I wouldn't say if it was more working class in the 90s. It is just the speed of change has been quicker now than at any other point in the history of the game. It's the same for rugby league. It's the same for rugby union because you have the dual code internationals, you have the dual code players. That was almost unthinkable before the 80s. I'd say before the 80s and the 90s, rarely did a player go, I'm going to go from union to league or league to union. It rarely happened. It was like sacrilege. And then there was a change. Rugby league salaries were going up, and rugby union was steadfastly amateur. And then you had players like Jonathan Davis and Campese in Australia who went, I'm going to give that a go. And when you had household names in rugby union going, I'm going to look at league, changed the game. Completely changed the game. And then you got league to union like Wendell Sailor and Lottie Takiri going the other way in the late 90s, 2000s. Changed the game. But when you had union players looking at league, so your Jonathan Davis, your Campeses, there you go. But I wouldn't say if it was more working class in the 90s. I think it's now that the fan demographic has changed. But I would say that rate of change was already underway. It's just been the pace of the change. So now fan bases are more diverse from wealth background, class background, um, nationality background. Like, are you born in the UK? Are you an overseas immigrant? Um, are you the children of immigrants, or have you new to the area? Age, that kind of thing. I find it interesting. There's actually less young people. I find. I look at my stats, and I call it the 1830 club. Okay. However, even though around half of my viewers are between the ages of 18 and 40, the 1830 club really, or 18 to 34, I'm actually now seeing more older viewers than what I was when I first started up this channel. And no one under the age of 17 apparently has viewed the channel at all for a while. So younger viewers are switching off sport because I see the demographic, and the biggest chunk of viewership is what is it? I think it would be classed as, I'll have to have a look, but it's late 20s to mid 30s. It's around 26 to, they do it in 8-year blocks. It's around 26 to 34. And then the drop off is sudden. After the age of 34, it drops off, but then the curve is like this. So it's straight up and then gently down. So say this is younger fans, it goes up sharply, slightly, and then it drops down, but then that drop off curve takes longer. So what I've noticed in the since the start of this summer, I will say this, since I started doing the club history videos again and doing a lot of them, I'm getting more older viewers. I think fan bases are aging. I don't actually think that fans in attendance and those who identify as football fans, I think the demographic has changed. I think and this is true of other sports as well, the demographic has changed. And I look at the data on the channel, and so the people my age and older are watching. People younger than me are watching in less numbers than people my age. So the next, how they work it out, and I'm going to look at this. I'm going to get this up on my phone, and I'm going to tell you the basic percentages. And this is going to stun you. So this is going to be really interesting. Let's get the YouTube Studio on the old mobile, and there's bar charts and lots of weird things. So let's have analytics. This I find very interesting because it's only a day or two behind when it comes to updating. So audience analytics. So the YouTube Studio on the mobile phone is not as fully fleshed out as the YouTube studio, obviously on the desktop. So let's have a look at all time. So the lifetime of the channel since 2017. This is very striking. So when I say there's still a fair proportion of older fans, this is very, very interesting. Speaking as an old kid, football was always loved by everyone, all classes, but league attendance was very low in the 80s. Hooligans everywhere. True. So 30, 40 years ago, there was a problem. But this is interesting. So all time, since I started the channel up and started making content, 13 to 17 years old, so that's 6 years time span, 0.7% of viewers all time are between the ages of 13 and 17, or were at the time they viewed. 18 to 24 years old, viewership, 31.8%. So those who are 10 years younger than me, so in their early 20s, are not watching because it's 25 to 34, so my age group, because I'm 32, about to turn 33, 48.9% all time are in that age bracket. This is where the drop off is so ridiculous. So 13 to 17, hardly anyone. Suddenly 31, 32% in the 18 to 24. 25 to 34, nearly 50% of my views are in the 18. What 35 to 44, 11.3%. There's a massive drop off post the age of 35. However, then it starts slowing down. So 45 to 54, 5.3%. 55 to 64, 1.4%, and then 65 years plus, 0.6%. So what I'm noticing is between the ages of 18 and 44, that's where the majority of viewers are watching, especially my age group. So your mid-20s to your mid-30s. That is where the majority of viewers are watching. But now let's have a look at the last year. In the last year, no one under the age of 17 has watched the channel, apparently, but the last 12 months. This is what's really striking to me. So 13 to 17-year-olds, none have watched. 18 to 24, 31.7%. My age group has gone up. It's higher. It's over 50% in the last 12 months. Because some of those younger fans have gone into that age bracket. 25 to 34, over 51.4%. Then the drop off is ridiculous at this point. So older fans are really switching off in the last 12 months. 35 to 44 years old, 4.9%. 45 to 54, 4%. 55 to 64, 4.3%. And then this is what's weird. So the older age groups over the age of 35 is all around 3.5% to 5% in the last year. So that's the overall demographic bars. The lifetime of the channel is different, very, very stark. And more women are watching as well. The women's viewership has fluctuated at times, has been, but some of them, the female viewership fluctuates, but is very, very low at times, and actually at sometimes higher. Right, so in the last 90 days, listen to this. This is where it's getting interesting. So more older viewers are watching now. I've noticed this. So in the last 90 days, no one between the ages of 13 and 17 has viewed the channel. It's fine. 18 to 24 years old, 22.7%. That's gone down in the last 90 days. This is the start of the football history series at this point. 25, my age group, again, it's gone down, but 25 to 34 years old, 47.1%. The 35 to 44. So the last year it was what, 5-something percent? It's gone up. So in the last 90 days, people 10 years older than me are watching now. So 35 to 44, 11.4%. 45 to 54, 8.4%. 55 to 64, 4.9%. The over 65s, 5.5%. The last 28 days, similar numbers. Very similar numbers. No one 13 to 17, 18 to 24, 31% flat. 25 to 34, 45.6. So those two are slowly dropping. The older viewers are starting to come in little bits. There's more growth in the older viewership in the last 90 days than there ever has been. The numbers are still low, but growing. And the trend is going upwards. So 35 to 44, 7.7%. 45 to 54, 7.7%. 55 to 64, 3.4%. 65 plus, 4.7%. So I'm seeing a trend, very slight trends, that the older viewers are starting to want to get in there. Now, the last week up to when data was last published, which is the 14th of September, so yesterday, I would believe midnight in the morning, or midnight in the evening, so yesterday, the last 24-hour period, not a single female has viewed, not a single female viewer has viewed. 13 to 17-year-olds, none. 18, this is very interesting. In the last week, 18 to 24-year-old viewers have made up 72.6% of the viewership on the channel. Interesting. And then 25 to 34 years old have made up the remaining 27 point something, or 28 point whatever it is, 4%. No older viewers apparently, which is obviously clearly incorrect. There's a degree of inaccuracy, Andrew, obviously, because you're an older viewer, but there's maybe only one or two older viewers, so therefore it doesn't even make a point of percent. That's why. So the last 90 days, it really is younger viewers are suddenly surging in, whereas they've been so the 18 to 24 group has been generally the second highest for percentage, is now the highest over the last 7 days. Oh, as I say, over the last year, that's different. But what I've noticed is there's more older viewers starting to creep into the conversation. The most views on my channel is the video concerning the Leicester City helicopter crash and Dan Rowan's comments in the aftermath. That's got the most views. The Rugby League World Cup coverage that I did back in 2017 are the next highest views, and then there's a couple of football videos, and there's a couple of cricketing videos. 2018 was an explosion on the channel for certain content getting views. So what is interesting is some of the ages. So we've got a 27-year-old, we've got a 60-year-old, we've got a 43-year-old. No teenagers that I can see there have said that's how old I am. So basically students, so I would say anyone in secondary school to university age, they're not viewing sport as much. What is interesting to me is it's called the 1830 club, as I call it. So what you would do those lads' holidays to Greece, Spain, the clubbing holidays, that demographic is where the majority of viewers are coming from. In the last week, people in their mid-20s to mid-30s have been watching the most content. I haven't done that much content in the last week, which you guys would have noticed. And I find that interesting. The club history videos have been mixed. It depends on the club. Some clubs have got really good views, others not so much. But what is interesting, since I've started doing the club history videos, more older viewers are tuning in. Now, what I find is the noticeable drop off after the age of 35, the percentages really drop off a cliff. Really drop off a cliff. What then I've also noticed is those percentages starting to grow again. So the demographic has changed over the last 5.5 years, massively. Massively. And actually looking at my data, everything's up. View counts are up. Hours, total time viewed on videos is up. So audience retention is up. So views in the last 28 days are up. Watch time is up. So the amount of time people are actually spending watching the content. Subscribers have gone through the roof. All sorts. Am I hoping for an explosion of subscribers when you do I think the Rugby League World Cup will help with that. It did last time. The Rugby League World Cup views went through the roof, and we got monetised the first time round, and subscriptions I think doubled or trebled within that 2017 tournament. I think both those two tournaments are gonna boost the channel. I've actually got some time off during the tail end of the Rugby League World Cup and the beginning of the Football World Cup. So basically, I've booked my holiday. So the second week in November, I'm off, and the first full week in December, I am off. So I actually have a bit of overlap with both tournaments, which is fantastic, because I've got to use up my holiday through my employer. So I will be able to watch a fair chunk of both tournaments. I won't be able to watch every game, and we don't know what the logistics behind kickoff times for the Rugby League World Cup. How many what they call matinee games, so like lunchtime, early afternoon games they're going to be, and evening kickoffs for the Rugby League World Cup. The Football World Cup, I think very likely we're going to see match times, kickoffs around five. What like the Women's Euros, 5 p.m. and 8 p.m. seem to be quite good, and the viewership on TV back that up. So it's very likely that over here in the UK we are probably going to see kickoff times at around mid-afternoon to mid-evening. So anywhere between, I'm going to say 3:30, 4 o'clock, and 7, 8 p.m. kickoff times for the European TV audience, where the majority of fans will be watching. And then you've got the US and Canada who both got their teams qualified as well. So the timings of matches are going to be important, but I can see decent TV timings. I can see the TV audience being key for these two World Cups. Massive, especially the football. It'll be tough for the Women's World Cup next year over here in it. No, I wouldn't think so much. I wouldn't think so. I wouldn't think so. I think the Women's Euros proved the fans in attendance, the viewership figures, um, backed it up. Can someone other than Australia, Tonga, PNG, they've improved their matches away from Port Moresby, which is the capital of Papua New Guinea. They've won their last two away from home, which is fantastic. PNG, I think, are a dark horse to get past the quarterfinals and disrupt things a little bit. But I think Tonga, with the fact they've beaten the Australians, they made the semi-finals at the last World Cup, and some new young talents come through. I think Samoa could be quite dangerous as well. I think it's a more difficult one to predict the final four, but I think we'll see. But the times for Women's World Cup Australia New Zealand, look, I watch the NRL. You're looking at kickoff times between 3:30 to 4 o'clock in the morning our time to around lunchtime, latest finish time. So you're looking at morning to lunchtime kickoffs, which is not the end of the world, really. Um, quite honestly, and it's in the school holidays pretty much because the women's tournaments take place about a month or so later than the men's. So you're in the school holidays. So if you are able to work from home, or you're a stay-at-home parent, or your kids are off school, that's what they're aiming for, is the family audience. So with the Women's Euros, they took place in July. School holidays. Another reason why viewership was so high. And a lot of people do book time off work at that time who are office workers, or go on to flexi contracts where they're only in the office or working 2 other days a week. They're allowed to flexi holiday, or vacation with the American way of looking at it. So I don't think that's going to be a problem, because it's going to be in July rather than June, and which is the middle of their winter, by the way, which is perfect for Australia and New Zealand. The problem is over there, they're going to be clashing with the AFL and the NRL, which are the two big sports. And they've got the women's AFL and the women's NRL as well, which have proven exceptionally popular with good viewership numbers, good quality sport played. That's the issue. Is in Australia and New Zealand, rugby league and rugby union have got more women and girls playing than football, soccer as they would call it. So, and while they've got decent international size when it comes to the women's game, and there's no dispute, they are going to be sort of competing against the established leagues and women's established leagues as well in rugby league, rugby union, and AFL. And that's the battle that the Aussies and the Kiwis are going to be facing. For us, I think the European audience is going to be fine. The US Canadian audience, it's going to be really late games. But again, all they are competing against when it comes to a traditional World Cup slot is Major League Baseball, really. And Major League Baseball as a sport is already losing that. Hertford Town women will be playing their first ever competitive game on Sunday. Well, there you go. That shows the impact the Women's Euros has had. It shows the impact the Women's World Cup a few years ago in 2019 has had. And the increased funding. Now, people go, critics of the women's game are still there. But I think the facts and figures back it up that it is growing, and the game is starting to make a small profit, which is fantastic. But those critics of the women's game are still there, and I've got to do my video on the Rugby League World Cup, like the month countdown, 1 month to go. So that's reminding me I've got to do some content later on this afternoon. Thank you very much, Chester. Thank you. But yes, so it's a month till the Rugby League World Cup kicks off, and England are playing the first game. That's Saturday. I believe yes, yes it is. I believe this is an expanded one because it's co-hosting. Because Australia could host the Women's World Cup by itself. New Zealand could host the former Women's World Cup by itself. So I do believe it is an expanded tournament. The fact that they're a co-host, yes, but don't quote me on that. But I do believe it is an expanded tournament, absolutely. But yes, no, as a Rugby League World Cup, I should do well. You are known as a Rugby League fan. I haven't done as much content as I would have liked on the Rugby League. I will admit. I've allowed. Yes, I've watched a lot of it. I've watched almost every NRL. I think I've watched every NRL game this season, apart from like one or two. I've done a fair bit of NRL content, but I haven't done as much this season as I should have and could have. Um, and I do have to look at some more NRL bad seasons. I'm going to look at every single Wooden Spooners from '98. Well, I've done that. 1989 I've already done. 2000 through till I've done the West Tigers, so I'm going to go through every Wooden Spooners from 2000 to 2021. I'm going to look at the Wooden Spoonists and the disastrous seasons thereof of said worst team in the league for every NRL season. So I've done 3 Wooden Spoonists so far. I've got, what, 21 seasons left to cover of the worst teams. That'll be fun actually because there are some Newcastle. The Newcastle Knights one season had 1 win plus a bye round, which meant they had 4 points, which is bad, really bad, really bad. Which makes the Canterbury Bulldogs last season and the West Tigers this season and the Western Suburb Magpies of '98 and '99 but world class. But they were bad. Yes, thank you, Dan. Thank you very much. We got there. We got to 950 quicker than I thought we would. And we've got a month to go for the Rugby League World Cup. There are a couple of other videos as well that I'm gonna be doing. I think this evening and tomorrow evening. I think tomorrow evening I'm going to be quite busy with the content. I'll be doing a lot of videos. I think tomorrow I just want to get some content up the channel. Maybe do a vid on the history of Rugby League World Cup. That's a very interesting one because the history of Rugby League, Rugby League World Cups. That is, it didn't really get nailed down as a proper tournament as it is now until comparatively late, actually. Crowd numbers were always really, really good, but the way they did the World Cup was weird. How they figured out how to do it. Is there a dark horse? I think Papua New Guinea can be dangerous. They've now proven they can win outside of Port Moresby in PNG. They've won their last 2 outside of PNG. They had a great World Cup 4 years ago. I think Fiji, given Fiji, if they can get their all the players that are eligible for selection fit and available, they're going to be quite a difficult team to shut down because they just throw the ball around for fun. Tonga, I think, are out of the top 4 from last time. For the semi-finals from last time, I think, are the dark horse. And I stick by that. Again, if they've got everyone available, they're going to be fantastic. I think, for me, I don't think Australia will win. I think New Zealand could win. I'm banking on New Zealand. I think New Zealand, after what happened in 2017 with the disaster that World Cup was for them, that was a disastrous tournament for New Zealand. They were terrible back in 2017 for the quality they had in that side. New Zealand have a very scary team. If all available players are available for selection, that is a terrifying squad. Absolutely terrifying squad. I think it was me rambling on about something. It was either addiction or mental health. Right? I was discussing about World War III. Is it going to happen? Some BS crap. It wasn't a sports channel initially. It was just me. The first sports video on the channel, the first sports video I believe was something to do with, I think, Newcastle United and Chelsea being investigated with that tax fraud investigation in regards to the Papis Cisse transfer back in the day. Maybe the Neymar transfer. It was one of those two videos. That news sort of broke roughly at the same time, and um, it was either the Neymar transfer from Barcelona to PSG or the Newcastle United Mike Ashley, investigation into the tax investigation they were undergoing. At the time, he was trying to sell the club. And then the one that the first video that hit 100 views on the channel was Mark Sampson being sacked as the women's manager for England, the football. And it wasn't to do with the racist jokes that he made or the racial slurs that he made in the dressing room. It was actually to do with a relationship he had with one of his players. Consensual adult relationship, but it was in breach of the FA Code of Conduct. Um, and that was the first video to go over 100 views. And then within a few days, the Rugby League World Cup started. And the rest is history. The Rugby League World Cup videos did very, very well. They were getting hundreds and then thousands of views. One of them got like 3,000 views, like in an hour and 40 minutes. Just, so there we go. I can do well. I can when it comes to the results. Yes. I've managed to get some breaking stories out, like, because social media is quite handy when you've got Facebook, when you have Twitter. Although I'm thinking about getting rid of my Twitter. To be fair, I don't really go on Twitter that often anymore. I used to go on Twitter all the time. I don't now. I barely. The only things I tweet are my videos. I don't really do much on Twitter these days. Um, but the, the first, I would say, 10 videos on this channel are absolute garbage. By the way. Absolute garbage. So if you're looking at the history of the channel, it's crap until about January 2018 when I get this laptop. I was doing it off my old iPad. I was doing it off my old mobile phone. Until I get the laptop in January 2018, I would say the early videos on this channel are absolute garbage in comparison to quality and discussion, and then you see the whiteboard gets into play in the 2018 summer, and I get the whiteboard out a lot, and my confidence changed in front of the camera. There you go. You had your first interview yesterday with Sacramento Republic FC as a ticket sales associate. So the ticket counter guy. Fair enough. They're in the US League now, but may move up to the MLS very soon. What I'm going to have to look at what the MLS plans for further expansion, because they're a league that's expanded quite rapidly, quite quickly. Now, the MLS had a problem. I've done a video on the history of the MLS up to 2018. I've got to look at the history of the MLS from foundation till now and revisit it. But in the first half of the league's existence, they got their strategy all wrong. The MLS. I think American fans can agree that the MLS got their strategy wrong, massively wrong. There is no denying that at all. There is none. And then obviously David Beckham goes over there, and the rest is obviously history. But they got it wrong. They were playing stadiums that were not suitable, where you got 5,000 crowd in a massive NFL or collegiate football stadium, and that's Aussie, American football stadium, which could seat up to 80, 90, 100,000. You've got 5,000 fans in the stadium. You're losing money. David Beckham comes in, a lot of interest is created. Early days on social media, so social media is in its infancy, but becomes one of the first major social media stories of sports stories of the social media age. Other big name players like Ibrahimovic and Kaká and Andrea Pirlo have followed to the MLS. Obviously, since David Beckham, broke the European, South American MLS barrier down for them, he prolonged his career. Same with Ibrahimovic. Everyone said, "Oh, he's done." He goes back to Europe and plays on for us, and still playing now. So you're in the office. You're the office ticket sales. So when you want to, so you'll be the guy who probably will phone up fans. Are you renewing your season ticket? Giving that courtesy call. I've done that. It's ticketing and what will be interesting is I would like to see what the MLS's plan is for future expansion. So I'm gonna have a look at you know um, the MLS as it sits currently now because I think doing a video on the MLS would be very very interesting. Um, I think it's a league that in Europe a lot of European fans don't take seriously and don't consider because the other major leagues are far more well known. Obviously, that they are the best, like, especially the NHL is the best ice hockey league in the world, no doubt. And so the only league you can actually compare the MLS to for an international sport is the NHL, because there are World Cups and World Championships, for example. And ice hockey is also an Olympic sport. The other major leagues, they're only really played in the US or Canada, both sports. Baseball, okay, Latin America and Southeast Asia and Japan and Korea obviously do play baseball at a high standard, and Australia. But for the most part, apart from the Pacific Rim and Latin America, baseball is again a North American sport. So the NHL is taken quite seriously over in Europe because the best European players play in the NHL. The MLS, you normally get the world class best players when they're in the latter stages of their career, not when they're in peak career or early development of career to become the superstars like your Alex Ovechkins, for example. Gets drafted, comes over from Europe at the age of 18, been a league superstar since the age of 18, stupid records. About to break a Gordie Howe record as well for the most goals scored for a single team. He's only 6 off breaking Gordie. He's going to do that. Um, make California great again. I think another issue with the MLS is some of the team names. They're trying to obviously have that European style Sacramento Republic, for example. Obviously, that's a link to the California Republic, and Sacramento is obviously the state capital of California, formerly a national capital because California was a separate country before it joined the Union for a brief period, but then football club. So some of the team names don't come across as very European, very American in style with a European twist. Um, it's good, but I would like to do a video on the MLS. They definitely not sure about anymore. It seems like they're bouncing around stadiums a lot. Um, so basically, the Sacramento Republic basically have stadium issues. That is, this is where I want to see what the plans are, obviously, for expansion with the MLS because Sacramento Republic clearly want to take that step and become another expansion team and build upon the growth in California of the sport, but the growth of the sport in general in the US. But I would like to see. Are you hoping that they will play in Hamilton? So I think yes. Looking at the MLS and what its expansion plans are, will the MLS become a 32 team league? Because that would be very very interesting how they would structure their season with a 32 team league, um, and their conferences and divisions. Because the NHL is now a 32 team, so that'll be very interesting. What's happened to Juventus? Suddenly the Italian league is competitive again. There you go. That's what's happened to Juventus is senior players have retired or moved on. Fans voted on the name of the team. You love the idea of the team as as that a fan-led organisation with fan involvement. I think a lot of sports fans around the world would agree with that statement that they would like to have more involvement in the day-to-days of their team and the direction and the identity of their teams. Absolutely, you don't see that a lot in US sports. You don't see a lot in some European leagues either. That's something that I think we are losing as professional sport becomes ever more and more professional. Certain leagues and sports have lost that link between the fan base and the sport play. Who will Tuchel manage next? I don't know. But everywhere he has managed, his tenures have been very stormy and very short. Only a couple of seasons at most. What's happened to him at Chelsea happened at Dortmund and PSG. He is known to be a difficult character off the field, away from the game, in regards to discussions with directors of football, chief scouts, development officers, owners, investors. Basically, the bits that a modern football manager has to be involved in. The boardroom, they have to have meetings, all that kind of. He's known to, but you know, clash with, especially PSG. It was very much when he clashed with Leonardo, the football director of football, sporting director, over recruitment and the direction that the club at PSG was taking. Um, and then on the flip side, Dortmund it was a bit of an unpleasant exit as well. So I'm not surprised with his style of exit at Chelsea. I'm surprised at the timing. Where he will go next, I don't know. I don't know. So St. Louis City Sports Club will be the 29th team for next year. The rate of expansion in the MLS is stunning. That's one thing I will say about the MLS. The rate of expansion in the last 15 so years has been ridiculous. I will say that about the MLS. They've decided, instead of stabilising a league and figuring out the issues, go with expansion. And they were criticised when they started that policy. They've stuck with that policy, and it's paying off. You think Tuchel will be Liverpool manager after Klopp? I don't know, because we've seen before with that Liverpool Chelsea dynamic when Benitez went the other way after Liverpool became Chelsea manager, fans weren't as welcoming. And Klopp has been there a long time and has stabilised the situation at Anfield. And where they were losing cup finals or hadn't been to a cup final for a while, he's now winning them or getting into cup finals that they've been lacking under previous managers since their last league title. And the style of football will be different. Tuchel will change Liverpool's style a little bit. So I think in that regard, I don't think it'll be Liverpool, and I don't think it will be Juventus. It definitely won't be Bayern Munich. I think that's that. But Bayern Munich, Red Bull Leipzig are open, but I don't know. Is the answer. Honestly, I couldn't tell you where Tuchel ends up. He might even get a job at international level, because I can see some managers losing their jobs following this World Cup. I can see that. But looking at the fact that managers have been sacked already this early in the season, stuns me. So, do I think the MLS will go more than 32? No, I don't see it going past 32. The fact that the NHL and NFL, much more established leagues that have taken their time, been slower with expansion, have decided 32's about right. I can't see them going past that. I can see them being bigger than Major League Baseball. At some point, I can see Major League Baseball being the vulnerable league out of the established Big Four, even though the NHL produces half the amount of income. Major League Baseball is a league under a lot of pressure right now, a lot of pressure. Um, and I can see Rob Manfred not being commissioner for much longer. Um, quite frankly, um, there's a lot of discussion about who replaces Bettman, who's going to be the next commissioner in the NHL after Gary Bettman. You know, like when it either retires, stands down, or whatever happens then. But I can't. The league that I think is in the biggest trouble in North America is Major League Baseball. And you look at the time of year it's Major League Baseball games are played. It's the same time of year as the MLS. Now the MLS is rapidly expanding and has obviously got its succession plan for expansion and the bidding process for the next teams entering. And it could be that Sacramento is brought in by 2025 to make it 30 teams. It could very well be. But as I say, like, I'm going to have to relook at the MLS and where where do they go next, or what the plan is. Will the MLS reach 32? I think they will. I think they'll do it within this decade. Because the World Cup in the US and Canada and Mexico is only 3.5 years away, I think they will probably announce their 32nd or 31st and 32nd teams for the following season, or maybe even have their inaugural season for that season. I can see that happening. I can see that being a an outcome. If not, I can see the 30th team being in place for that World Cup, and the 31st and 32nd teams being announced following that World Cup. But that's something I think um, we'll see what happens there. The NHL, I think, is the gap between the NHL and Major League Soccer is there, but the rate that Major League Soccer is expanding is where those revenues have been caught up because of expansion fees. You take out those expansion fees, yes, the revenues are there, but I think that's an artificial closing of the gap because of expansion. Once the leagues stabilise, because Seattle and Vegas pumped in over, what was it, 1.1 something billion dollars was added to the NHL with the two expansion teams. I think it was $1.15 billion was added to the NHL just out of expansion fees out of two teams. Um, I think the issue that the NHL is facing is because of COVID and the cost of the bubble in 2020 and the reduced schedule they had in 2021. That is now impacting them, and that's where the escrow and the flat cap. The fact that since Vegas has joined the NHL, multiple teams have joined the MLS. Multiple. I think 5 teams have joined the MLS since Vegas joined. So since 2 teams have joined the NHL since it was 30, 5 or 6 teams have joined the MLS. So the rate of expansion is ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. At some point, when that expansion stops and the league does stabilise, then you can get a true reflection on revenue coming in and expenditure. The other big difference between the MLS and the NHL is Major League Baseball teams have had sponsors on their jerseys forever, right? Forever. Since the beginning, they've had shirt sponsors, whereas the NHL are bringing them in for this season. They had the helmet sponsors last year. Now we're having the little jersey sponsorship. So the NHL has only just started to allow sponsors on match day tops, basically, the players. And that spider is going to die. Excuse me, very briefly. But this buggy is dead. Right. Sorry, I had a bug on the wall. Yeah, the Seattle Kraken joined last year. Vegas set the bar so high for an expansion team that it was almost impossible to follow. They should have a better season. The Kraken should have a much better season. They will have learnt a lot of lessons from the last 12 months. They've made some roster changes. They've drafted. They've brought in players. There's free agents available. But historically, Vegas is just an aberration of an expansion season. Most expansion seasons are like Seattle's. It's what they do in the second and third seasons following up. There needs to be improvement. Needs to be there. They need to be better. No one is expecting to make the playoffs because their season went true to what an expansion season should be like in the NHL. Yeah, I had a big one last night that was about that big spider on my curtains. He went in vacuum cleaner. He was released. He was released. I try and do that. I vacuum. Because I've got my vacuum cleaner has a see-through container, so you can see if they've survived the vacuuming. I do tend to actually suck them up, the vacuum cleaner, and then release them outside in the garden. Doesn't always work, but I intend that's generally what I do. As soon as I've caught them, I try and release them, but most of them, unfortunately, I try and do that, but doesn't always work. I'll have to have a think I'll have to have a look at the map of the MLS. I'll have to have a look at where the teams are currently. All 30 teams are currently placed, or 29, and then I'll have to figure out if Sacramento is the 30th, considering if they can get a stadium. Again, I'll have to look at that. Right, I've been going for nearly 2 hours. I'm going to call it a stream. I've got some content to prep for, but thank you very much for all your questions. We've ended on a very interesting point. Very interesting point. And we're looking at a league that I think gets underappreciated and undervalued here in Europe, and that is the MLS. So I'll be doing some content on the MLS soon. I'm going to have to look at where all the 29 locations and then I'll pick where would I put teams. If I was to make a 32 team MLS league, where I'll put teams. That'd be kind of an interesting video to do. Anyway, thank you very much for watching, and I'll have some more content for you soon. I've got a couple of videos to prep for later on this evening, my time, and I'll have bye for now, basically.